Good evening. Before we begin tonight's program, we are discussing topics related to addiction, mental health, and domestic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Domestic violence incidents have increased over the last 9 months of the onslaught of the pandemic. There are places you can go for assistance, clarity, and support. Every contact to the National Domestic Violence Hotline is confidential. If you are a person who is a survivor of abuse, or a concerned family member or friend, or are an abusive partner seeking to change yourself, please call 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can go to thehotline.org. The service is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and your privacy and confidentiality is protected. Moreover, if you're looking for options to go down the road in detecting and treating your addictions, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-4357. Again, 1-800-662-4357, or go to samhsa.gov. The service as well is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and is a confidential, free information service for individuals and family members facing addictions amongst other mental health and or substance use disorders. And on that, let's begin. On a beautiful, snowy evening, I figure it's time to have a conversation with a dear friend. Tonight we're going to talk to someone who has a story or two about many different things that she's experienced in her life and a very interesting career. We'll talk to Sara Steele tonight, and we'll have your questions and comments. This is The Venture Forward. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome. I'm John Venturini. I'm a recovering addict of alcoholism, overeating, and compulsive gambling. I have been tracking my food for 670 days, have been sober for 567 days, and have not gambled for the last 249 days. And I am down 277 pounds total, with 23 pounds to go. It is an absolute honor to have all of you on the show tonight. And I'm also very honored to have a dear friend joining me for a conversation. And we'll tell you more about her in a second. But I can get my name out of the graphic like that. And I would say hi to Carolina. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Buenos tardes indeed. Merck, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Sherry, Congrats, Mark, on your engagement. Oh, we're going to talk about that too. That's awesome. Congratulations, Mark. And Leah. Hi, hope you're doing well. Good to see you tonight as well as everybody else. And Ashley, good evening. Hope you're doing well. Glad to see you on the show tonight. Let's talk about our guest tonight. So about 4 months ago, and I think I've hinted to this in a couple of episodes, but also in a couple of VF Talks as well, about a program that I did called LIDA, which is live every day in August. It's something done through an organization called Live Streaming Pros. Basically, LIDA is a challenge where you have to live stream every day in the month of August. They also do one in April, which can borrow the same name, LIDA. It's April and August. But what you find is a lot of people who do not live stream or haven't vlogged or podcasted or anything, but have a curiosity about doing it and want to break that sort of mold, do LIDA, and they grow their skills through 31 days. And our guest tonight is someone who is a really great student of that program, but moreover, within minutes of talking to her, I know she was going to be a friend for a very dear long time, and I'm so glad she's on the show tonight. So let's read the bio real quick. Sara Steele is an artist and activist living and working in Philadelphia. She draws inspiration from her travels, the natural world, and her interior landscape. Since 1979, her work has been published and licensed on hundreds of products, including an annual calendar, now in its 41st edition. And I purchased a few of those. They are a fantastic calendar, and I seriously recommend you going to her site and getting one. She is an incredible artist. I deviated from the copy. Let me go back real quick. She has exhibited in galleries and museums in the United States and abroad, and 2 monographs of her work have been published in 1994 and 2005. Sara has a very interesting perspective on many facets of this journey called life, and has been a guest on several editions of VF Talks, which we do on Friday nights. And tonight, she's excited and here, and I'm excited that she's here to share some of her story. I got tongue-tied a bit. So let me get her on and let's start our conversation. Sara, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I apologize for butchering that intro.
That's all right. I was just thinking, hey, Merck, congratulations. And John, thank you for plugging the calendar, since I don't want to have a sofa of them in January. I appreciate it.
I got to tell you, it's an incredible calendar. I have a copy, and I think I've given one now, so I still have 3 left that I'm giving for Christmas presents next week, and I probably will put one upstairs in the other office. But I'm so glad to have that, and it's up on the wall, and I'm really just so happy to have you on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Glad to be here. Only a tad nervous, but I'll get over it.
Oh, you'll be fine. It's funny. You mentioned Merck, and Merck was on the very first episode back in mid-October,
yeah.
And he was very nervous, and I said, look, we're here for you to tell your story, and this is not perfection. This is not any sort of Emmy Award-winning presentation. I'm here to tell a story. I'm here to help others tell their story, and that's why we're here. So don't be nervous. Nothing to be nervous about at all.
I think it's not so much nerves about being on. It's about being public. That sometimes gets to me. But this feels like a safe space, so I will.
It is it's a very safe place.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of guests who have told their stories, and I'm glad you're here to tell yours. And there are so many different facets of your story, so I'm really excited to start talking about that.
Yeah. Where do you want me to start?
I the old adage is if you don't know where to start, start at the beginning. But I'm gonna ask you this question. I mean, I know that your work, your artwork is so incredible, and I think if we start going in reverse and starting to tell the story of here's the artwork and this is how it all started coming to pass and your talent and your fascination with art. I think if we start there, but then also talk about everything else we're dealing with this year, I think it all will work in tandem
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. Well, I mean, the art stuff, I mean, I've been an artist since I was a kid, actually, probably, and I've been making things. Um, and the calendar, I've continued to do it partly because it's a habit, but partly because people like it and they bug me about it. So, I threatened to stop after 40 years, and everybody's like, no, 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 no. So I was like, okay, fine. But the work that I've been involved in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years it's very different from what's published in the calendar. It's completely abstract. It's very, it, it comes out of my meditations and my really deep interior, sort of going in and investigating my inner life. And that's where that work emerges from. I think in Lita, I actually did um, a demonstration of it. We had that one day where we had to do something
Yes.
we would never do in public. And that was actually brilliant because I forgot to turn the camera around. I was like going to do this thing. I forgot to turn the camera around. So anyway, so it goes. Progress, not perfection.
I think when you did that day on Lita and you did that live sort of exhibition or live painting, I thought it was so incredible that you were doing it first and foremost. But second of all,
Yeah.
you realized what was going on and you went back on camera and you did another 10-15 minutes of what the final work was, and it was so incredible to see that and just to see that artistic process in action.
Yeah, and it's hard because my process is extremely private. I mean, nobody comes into my studio. I really, in order to focus deeply, I need to be uninterrupted. I don't even want anybody in the vicinity. It's just I can't do it. Okay, I think I'm going to go back toward the beginning and start that. I'm sort of having trouble figuring out how to go back this way. Just for people who don't know me, I grew up in a family that was difficult, challenging. Um, my mother was a rapid cycling manic depressive, never treated for it, self-medicated with alcohol, with cigarettes, with sex, and there was a lot of abuse in our family of various varieties. Um, and actually, one of the worst um, was the verbal violence and the emotional violence. I mean, sexual violence is bad, but the other stuff is really, it affects your psyche in a very interesting way. Like if you've been beaten, you have bruises, you've been beaten. But the language in our household was, it was sarcasm, it was ridicule, it was criticism. And it wasn't until I had done a lot of therapy and grown up quite a bit that I realized that wasn't normal. Because your family of origin, you think that's what everybody's family is like.
Hmm.
And it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't normal at all. So there was a lot going on. When I was in my teens, I got super bored in school. I just couldn't stand it. I was a straight A student, but I was bored to tears. So I dropped out of high school. I set up my own program. It was fabulous. Um, but then after I graduated, I had a failure to launch problem. And it wasn't until I was in family therapy a long time later that I realized my mother was unable to help me
Hmm.
launch because we were so codependent. She needed me there to take care of her. And
All
I
right.
didn't have any insight into that. And so I got massively depressed, suicidal. And I made several serious suicide attempts, more than several. And I was an utter failure at suicide, so I gave it up eventually. But in the course of different attempts, I was institutionalized several times.
Mm.
The first time I was in a private hospital where I was mostly surrounded by chronic people who had been in there, and their families put them in there and they were there for life, or drug addicts who were in rehab but weren't because they were shooting up a whole lot about drugs being in there. Got out, more suicide attempts. My mother couldn't deal with me, so she made me a ward of the state. And the state locked me up and committed me. Now, they decided that I was schizophrenic, which I wasn't. And so once I got in, they just started slapping me full of, antipsychotic drugs,
Hmm.
Stelzine, Thorazine. I mean, the drugs in those days were such heavy, heavy duty drugs. And I spent most of my time in seclusion because I preferred it. So I would act out so that I'd get put back in seclusion. But every time I would start to regain my mind, I would just get slapped with drugs again. So I was so out of it most of the time. And you could really I could feel my mind just like
Hmm.
be away from me. And then I'd start to get it back and boom, it would land again. Anyway, there's only a certain amount of time that they can keep you if you're um, institutionalized by the state. So one day they just let me out. They gave me $1 for bus fare and they let me out the front door. I had no idea where I was. I was full of medication. I didn't know anything. Um, Eventually, I found my way back, and another attempt or two wound up in another institution. By that time, I realized not only was I not good at suicide, but I needed to find an alternative because
Hmm.
what I was doing was not working. You know, you can only go so long banging your head against a wall. But I was so massively depressed that I really didn't have any way to get up.
Right.
So do you remember the matchbooks that you used to get? I mean, my mother was a heavy smoker, so there were matches all over her house, and they was like, become an X-ray technician, or become an EMT. Right? And so I thought, perfect. That's perfect. That's exactly what I'm worth. Basically, I was deciding that EMTs were the scum of the earth, which was pretty rude of me when I think about it now. But in those days, I was expected to go to graduate school. I wasn't expected to, become an X-ray technician. So so for me, it was really, I was really slumming it. So
Mm.
I got into a program and and I excelled. I was in the program with a lot of people who just graduated from high school who this was going to be a really good job for them. And for
Right.
me, it was just going to be like a way to, you know, spend my life alive rather than dead. But all along the way in my life, I've had a lot of miraculous things happen. And in that setting, I had two teachers who saved me.
Mm.
One of them saw me doodling and she realized that I had art in me. And she took a drawing of mine one day without telling me. And because it was a Votech school, she had the principal print it. And she gave me back 50 prints of what I had done on this beautiful, beautiful paper. And I
Mm.
was like, wow. And then this other teacher, and he was the one that really did it for me. He was a grad student. He was very intrigued with the brain. And I had to study anatomy and physiology with him. And I'd just stay after school, and he and I would talk and talk and talk and talk about the brain and neurophysiology and neurochemistry. And he would say things like, 20 years from now, this field's going to explode, which it has, because we didn't know anything back then. He said, but
Hmm.
you just wait and see, it's going to blow your mind. And actually, many, many, many years later, I tracked him down through his alumni association because I wanted to tell him, how much he had done for me.
Mm.
I'm going to cry. Because basically he gave me back my mind.
Hmm.
Like in those conversations, he let me know that I could think, I could have a critical conversation, I could investigate, I could learn. I went off on my own and studied all this other stuff. Anyway, so that was kind of a real beginning of getting myself back together. I moved away. Um, I actually got hired back to teach in that program the next year. I made enough money that I could go to Europe. So I quit my job and I went to Europe. I came back in time for graduation because I liked my students. But so I went to Europe and just hacked around, took my guitar and backpack. And I had some miracles that happened there. Um, and I don't know if I'm going to go into that. It's a very long story down many,
Mm.
many, many roads. I ended up by accident in the Canary Islands. I don't even know
Hmm.
where I was. Leah, I think I just actually saw
Yep.
a comment.
Yeah, I can bring it back up.
Yeah. Hey,
There it
Leah.
is.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my life has been saved more than once by teachers. I actually had one of my teachers actually found me when I tried to commit suicide, took me to the emergency room, had my stomach pumped, and to this day, and we're still friends, has never said a word about it. Not one word. Like, that's amazing, right?
I mean, those are the sort of
Anyway,
people that live with the sort of proviso that they're going to do things for other people. Teachers definitely the quintessential definition of that, where they do things no questions asked, and they look to try to improve and try to help others along a better way. That's
yeah,
just
yeah.
incredible.
I think teachers are really gifts and they're not paid anything near what they deserve.
Hmm.
When I got back from Europe, I was still depressed. I didn't know what to do. Um, so I got into therapy. And that was the beginning of huge changes because I mean, I had been reading a lot about psychology. I had been really thinking a lot, journaling a lot, but my family therapist urged me to do a genogram. Um, my aunt, who I wasn't really that close to, my mother's sister, called me one day and she said, Sarah, you're the only person I can tell this to. I'm suicidal and I don't know what to do. It's like, I felt so honored.
Right.
And I said, okay, well, we got to get you a therapist like right away, like yesterday. So we did. And I ended up using that same therapist. And the two of us would schedule our sessions the same day. And then afterwards, we would spend hours and hours and hours going through our family of origin. We did a genogram, it was generations, and we found suicide, we found mental illness, we found abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of stuff. And as we started to put that together, our individual lives started to make sense. And, when that happens, I mean, this too from your own
Oh
life.
yeah.
Yeah, that's when it starts to work. So I made great progress then. Do you have something that you want to ask me?
Yeah, I think there might be some that are on the stream tonight that may not know what a genogram is. Do you want to
Oh,
define it for a
sure.
quick second?
Yes, of course. A genogram it's sort of like a family tree that you make, and it has all the members of your family, but what you put on it to whatever extent you can is births, deaths, major transitions like weddings, divorces, and then you look at illness patterns, physical and emotional illness patterns, and you start to see all these little patterns that weave all the way through. And one of the things that I realized doing that was that my mother had been sexually abused when she was young, and that was the thing that cascaded into her whole lifetime of behaviors. And she does not say that. She would not agree with me. Um,
Our dear
unfortunately,
friend has a comment here, and hey, how are you doing? Just so you come on. She says
yes.
ancestral
Hi.
trauma is real. When we heal both our ancestors and descendants.
Well, I sort of agree with you, and I sort of don't. Maybe on the ancestors part, I think on the descendants. Um, I took a buck stops here stance because I didn't want to have children that I ended up abusing. And so it was like, no, I got to do my work because I would never do this to my own children. Unfortunately, I've seen other parts of the next generation in my family who haven't done their work, who have ended up becoming perpetrators. The victim becomes the perpetrator. It's this cycle that if you don't break it, it doesn't get broken. It just gets
Yeah.
acted out, sometimes in different ways. But I had to break it. I had to break it. So that first round of therapy was really, really productive. And, um, I was starting to publish, I was starting to exhibit, I was really launching my art career. It was going well. And then I started to get depressed again. And so I went to see my doctor. I got on some antidepressants. I went to a therapist. I found another therapist. And she said, I didn't know at that point that I had been abused. I
Mm.
just knew that I had weird stuff going on inside. She said, I think you have PTSD. So I'm going to put you on an SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, because that's the drug. I don't know if you know Bessel van der Kolk's work at all, but that's the drug that when they started to treat Vietnam vets and they gave them that drug, it tamped down their the reaction, their reactivity that was taking place in their amygdala, the fight or flight stuff, and
Yeah.
allowed them to process story through their hippocampus so that they could make a narrative of it and to heal. So she did that. It was great. It worked. And then I started to really uncover the the bad news. And it was horrifying. It was really horrifying. So she said, because she was very wise,
Oh, just before you
I want you
continue, a follow up was
yeah,
we,
go ahead.
we heal the descendants because we don't pass on our trauma. That's why.
We don't. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't. If we take responsibility for it. Yes, you're right. You're exactly right. Um, yeah. Anyway, so she said, go into the studio. I want you to make work about this stuff and bring it in and talk to me because we'll get further faster if you do that. And I did. And I made a huge body of work and we figured out a lot of stuff. And out of that came another sort of miraculous twist of fate. I've worked with nonprofits all of my career, women's organizations, peace, social justice, environmental, all kinds of things. And I was pretty well known in the women's community in Philadelphia, a little bit nationally. And so Women Against Abuse was having an anniversary. I guess it was 10th or 20th anniversary. And they called me and they said, would you do an exhibit as part of our celebration? The public utility, our electric utility, PICO, just
Hmm.
built a new building. They're going to inaugurate it. They're supporting us. They're going to give us their lobby for our celebration as part of the opening of their building. I said, well, yes, except the work that I've been doing is not the work that you think of when you think of me, which was like calendar work and posters and, things that people were seeing on t-shirts and greeting cards or whatever. I said, this work is really intense. It's something else entirely. And they said, I told them what it was about. And they said, oh my God, that's perfect. We want to do it. So it turned out that PICO was committed to educating their entire workforce about domestic violence because they had had two employees battered and killed by their spouses. So they were educating this 10,000 person workforce. It was amazing. Anyway, I did the exhibit, huge amount of publicity. The mayor's there, the senators are there. I'm like freaking out. They did a catalog. And I'm like, here I am going public with this stuff that was so personal, so intensely personal. Huge article in the newspaper. And then that was when my family started to see, and the community started to see, because I was out, I was outed basically. Although I wasn't sorry about it, I allowed it to happen. And I never named names. I never, it was my story. It wasn't about anybody else. I took complete responsibility for it. But people were not happy about it. They said I was making it up. False memory syndrome. I mean, if you go back and you read the literature from that time, people like Elizabeth Loftus were writing about, false memory. There was so much garbage, and people didn't know enough. They didn't know enough about the brain either. They're just figuring it out. So, one of the things that's weird about being in an abusive family, and a lot of people have this, like kids of um, ministers often have this. Your abuser, your perpetrator, can be this like, publicly everybody thinks they're wonderful. They're this terrific person in the community, and like so that when I was talking about my stuff, nobody could believe that this went on in my family. Oh, your family is this and blah 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 and that. So it was worlds in collision.
I'm going to
Anyway,
bring up the phone number real quick just because, again, we've been talking about it.
please do. Yes,
Yeah.
please do.
So the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233, or the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-4357.
The hotline's really great because they're very, very safe, and they have translators in over 100 languages, so anybody who needs help can get it. I dedicated my calendar to them for about 20 years and wrote about them. Anyway, I forgot where I was. Doesn't matter. Pick it up anywhere. Oh, so I was still dealing with depression. By that time, I knew enough about the PTSD stuff, and the SSRIs had worked for that, but I was still depressed, and so the medication wasn't working anymore. I went to my doctor and I said, you know, I'm not going to make it. Like, I'll be dead in 6 months if I don't figure out something to do.
Right.
And she said, this is above my pay grade. I think you need to see somebody who really knows the neurobiology, the chemistry, a really great psychiatrist. Not all psychiatrists, believe me, not all psychiatrists are great. So I said, well, who should I go to? And she said, there's nobody in your network. And I didn't have any money at that point. So network was beside the point. I couldn't even pay for health insurance. I had about $100 to my name. I couldn't work. I could hardly get out of bed. I could barely go to the grocery store because I was afraid that somebody was going to ask me how I was. That's how bad it was. I mean, I was so dysfunctional. And I said, well, who would you go to? And she told me, and I said, then that's who I go to. I called her. I made an appointment. It was so expensive that I didn't even know how I was going to afford the appointment, the intake appointment. And the day of the appointment, I got a check in the mail for $500 out of the blue.
Wow.
My best friend had gotten an inheritance, and she just sent me a gift. And that $500 paid for my psychiatrist and my first round of medication. So from that point, and I've gone pretty long way here. We're talking from 14 to 50, so I've left out all that. But late 40s. The psychiatrist said to me after I told her everything, and she asked me a lot of questions. She said, "Well, you know what? This is like pretty cut and dried. Like this is a pretty simple diagnosis." And I'm like, "Well, great, give it to me straight." And she said, "You have type 2 bipolar disorder." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" Because I knew what bipolar was because I lived with somebody growing up who had it, and I knew I wasn't like that. I wasn't rageful. I didn't go up and down. She said, type 2 is different because when you're okay, you're very high functioning creative. But when you go down, you can't get back up.
Right.
You just can't.
There's no bump up.
You can't get back up. And I said, that's it. What do you do about it? She said, well, there are about 10 different options. And she went down the list of the options. And I said, well, what are the side effects profiles? What would you do? Whatever. So we picked one, and she said, we have to titrate this really slowly. You're going to go up really, really slowly, like 25 milligrams every 2 weeks until you get to a place where it's working. So I had to call her every week, tell her how I was doing, up the medication. And this went on for, oh, easily 6 months. I mean,
Mm.
so I still wasn't in great shape. And then I called her, and I remember it was in November when I called her. I called her for a check-in, and I said, um, she said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel normal." And she said, "What's normal?"
It's all relative, right?
So, but it was true. I felt normal, and
Mm.
it was pretty amazing to feel normal. And, all this while there's outside stuff going on in my life. Like I'm getting ready for this big mid-career retrospective at a museum and publishing this book. And, so I was managing to function. I just didn't feel like I was functional, you know, and I didn't really have, my quality of life was very bad. Anyway, so I got normal, and that was amazing. And then in the spring, I realized it wasn't quite as good as I thought.
Mm.
So I told her, and she said, "You know what? I think your system, I think your dopamine system is a little bit shy. So we're going to give you a little bit of a boost there, and you see if that works." Well, that cocktail worked, and I have been on it to this day.
Wow.
And I have never had another episode of depression.
That's
And
incredible.
she and I have an agreement. I mean, now I only see her once a year, but our agreement was if you go south and you feel bad for 2 weeks, you call me immediately. Immediately.
So you have some sort of safety contract or safety plan with her, and you have those sort of things all basically on paper and also in plan form.
Yep. Yep. And I would. I mean, if I went through 2 weeks of not being well, partly because did you ever read? I'm blanking on his name now. He was the guy who wrote the book about Prozac, but the book he wrote afterwards was about depression.
Mm.
And it was sort of a comprehensive study of the last 5 years of research on depression.
Right.
And he's a doctor at Yale, I think. Anyway, I read that book, and he said after 2 weeks of depression, the hippocampus starts to lose volume. And when I read that, I freaked out because I thought, I don't want my brain to be destroyed. I don't want to lose it. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what propelled me to go get help. So, that's been kind of it ever since. There's been plenty of weird life twists and turns and lumps and bumps, and but it is what it is.
Yeah. I think that was one incredible story first and foremost. I mean, the sort of the way that story turns and whatnot, and those sort of realizations, and more importantly, those teachers that have been in your life that kind of guide you back on a path to do something, I think is incredible. But I think there are a couple comments, and we're going to go through the comments in a second, but one thing I've gravitated to in the last 2 years, and especially this year, in the last 5-6 months, you'd say, is how when you start thinking positively and you start manifesting things, they actually get manifested. And there are some people in this room that know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm going to bring your comments up in a second, I promise. But it's like, the thing is, having a full understanding of what's going on, having a full understanding of where you are with things, but always trying to put your best foot forward is just putting yourself in a place where you're at least giving yourself a chance to do something. It's not a guarantee, never is. But you're at least putting yourself a chance to do something. And I think the last 2 years, what we've experienced in the last 9 months as humanity en masse, I think has been ever pressing of that. And then I'm going to start bringing up comments now in the sense that someone says, where was it? Of course, as soon as I say something, it's like, where can I find it?
I actually want to piggyback on that just for a second, which is, I think you're right about making yourself available to those things. One of the things that's been amazing to me is the times that I didn't make myself available and things happened.
Right.
That's what blows my mind. you know.
Because you can manifest things both good and bad, so you might as well just start thinking good.
Anyway, what did she have to say?
Sherry says, wow, reaching out seems to be a theme this week. I would say not only this week, I would say this month, I would say this quarter, this year, the last couple years, so on and so forth.
Show.
Yeah, this whole show. Someone said, hello, John. And because there's no name there, I'm just going to put up hello, Johnny, because, hey, you'll get known one way or another. I couldn't even recognize. Anyhow. Brett has a good question. Do you have plans to write a book?
No, I don't. I've already written books. I have one former colleague who keeps saying, every time we talk, she said, I never heard that story. You know, and then I never heard that story. She's like, how many lives have you had? So I don't know, but it takes time, you know, and how many years do I have to make the paintings that I want to make? You know, you can write a book or you can paint, and some people can do both, but I don't think I'm one of them.
I think what you put on canvas, what you do painting-wise, the watercolors, etc., is incredible. So, by all means, do as many as you can. I mean, your work is incredible, and
my
what
hope
I do
is that they show the story. You know, that's the hope, but
Yeah.
it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Bring your website up again. If you haven't gone to her website, please. Sarah's website is amazing. Talks to her work and everything. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. A few more comments. Des says, hi Des, how are you? I was offered an art scholarship when I was 19 years old, but didn't take it up because it interfered with my drugs and alcohol.
Oh, that's so sad, Tess. That's so sad.
Sherry's praying with the hands together, and then Bren had a few more comments. The Channing Universe had your number, and then she says that therapists, unfortunately, were creating false memories, unfortunately. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally get that. But yeah, well, you know, anybody can make hay with anything. And if they're not on the up and up and they're not smart or they just are in it for the money or the publicity, they could say whatever they want, especially if they have the pedigree to say it. It doesn't mean that they're right.
No.
And it's tricky. You know, it's tricky to find good help, too. You have to be careful.
I don't know about me, and I don't know about you, but I know a lot of the people I talk to that I've known gone to therapy for one form of therapy or another, they go through a good deal of different therapists until they find one that understands their story. It's not a perfect science.
You know, I was lucky in a way because a fair number of my dear friends, like lifetime friends, are family therapists. And so I both learned a lot from them because they were actually students of Ed Friedman's. So I was getting information from them, but also I sort of knew what a good therapist was and wasn't because of them. So I was pretty lucky in that way. Psychiatrists, I had a really bad feeling about psychiatrists because of, in the institutions that I was in, I saw some psychiatry that these guys shouldn't even have licenses. They
Right.
shouldn't have had licenses. You know, so I was a little dubious about that.
I think once you find a good therapist, though, and I'm fortunate that there are a couple of really great therapists that follow the venture forward, and thank you for following, please, thank you.
Yes, one was on one night. She was wonderful. She was really
Oh, Ashley was fantastic, and I hope to
Yeah.
have her back on the show soon because
Yeah,
she
she
is
was great.
absolutely phenomenal. Brent also says, such an important show and channel. Thank you. Thank you very much. You run a great show yourself, and I appreciate you saying that. And definitely, if you get a chance, see her. Spirit Throw Me a Bone live. She is absolutely fantastic. And then a hi from Matt Haas of All Things YouTube.
Hey,
Sarah
Matt.
JV. Hey, there are no minds blown, no mind equals blown tonight, so I'm here. It's good to see you both. Matt, it's good to see you. Glad you were able to join us for sure.
Hey, Matt. I was telling JV about my table that I built because of your inspiration out of scrap.
it doesn't have to be perfect. It never has to be perfect. Has progress, not perfection, as we always say, right?
That's right.
Let's see. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry says hit that like, y'all, and I appreciate that. And then Marilyn basically agrees that indeed hit that like button. Please hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends. We're trying to do some really important things here, and I appreciate that. Did not put my name on here. I know it's somewhat curious. I'm laughing inside, not laughing on the outside. But hey, I'm glad you're putting comments in. I just wish Ecamm would tell me what it is, or you would just, say something.
I'm wondering, I've skipped over large sections of this story, but I'm wondering if people have any questions. I would love to answer. If people have specific questions, I'd love to address them.
Yeah, so in the comments, if you have any questions, just, definitely put questions in here. And you'll definitely try to address as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. But then always, if you have questions, you can always go back and watch the replay and put the questions in and let us know. Or you can always email me. I'm at the... as that goes right over your graphic, that's just bad. theventureforward@gmail.com.
It's funny. I never think of myself as normal, but a fair number of people think that I'm sort of normal and have had a somewhat normal life. And sometimes I'll let loose with aspects of this story, and I haven't told, I've told a speck of them tonight, and they're like, what? What? So I'll have to say, one of the things I'm grateful for is that I never became an addict. I'm really glad that I didn't become an addict. Really glad. And I think I don't have those tendencies, luckily, because I could have gone really south,
I think, Sarah, the reason why your story gravitated to me is the fact that here's someone who's gone through a lot in her life, has taken different turns or whatnot, not necessarily that of an addiction, but realizes that there's some help. And the thing is, and Sarah, we've talked about this, but I might as well share this with everybody, is the goal of this show is not necessarily that of addiction, although we've spent a lot of that on the last 17 episodes, haven't we? It's about the sort of things, both physical, mental, what have you, the roadblocks that stand in our way from being better people, from doing the things that we were set out to do in this life. And in your case, it's realizing, okay, things are not going well. It's a question of the depression, whatnot, and working through that and having that sort of manifesting of the two teachers and these sort of lucky breaks along the way, the matchbooks and everything, to realize that there are different directions for you to go that's going to suit you better. And I think that story is very important, and I'm really glad you're telling it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came out of the Women Against Abuse exhibit, it was kind of a 12-year period of magic, is that because I never went to art school, and I live in a city that has the oldest art school in the country and other great art schools, you can't be in a gallery in Philadelphia if you don't have a pedigree. It just doesn't work. So I was always outside of the mainstream art. But because of that exhibit, and I had to speak at that show at the electric utility, somebody at the Academy got onto me and contacted me and asked if I would come do a project with them. And I ended up going and doing a show. And at the time I was working with the Clothesline Project, and I organized, different groups around the city to hang it in City Hall courtyard. And so I did the Clothesline Project with women from 5 shelters in the Philadelphia 5-county area. We brought them into the Academy. I showed them my work that I had done in therapy. I talked about it, and then they started to tell their stories and their work. And it was astonishing. And the women who were on the board of the academy, and these are like women, they've got on, they've got $400 haircuts and $2,000 suits, and they're all, they're like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up doing that for, I don't even know how many years. They asked me to join the board of the academy. Every single time I did it, one of those women would come up to me afterwards and she would say, um, listen, I have a friend, you know, and she would want information from me about her friend. And because of those women, I started to fold into my education about abuse the whole thing of economic abuse, because these
Mm.
women, a lot of them were, they were the equivalent of battered spouses economically. They, they lived in mansions, they had whatever they wanted, and they had no control over their financial lives. And so if their spouses decided, to do something or leave them or beat them up or whatever, they didn't understand their options. And so it was
I'm going to
really an
take that
amazing.
time to put that number back up.
Yes, please do that. That organization is so fantastic. The National Domestic Violence Hotline. They're just, they're really the best of the best.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did that work at the academy for a long time, and it ended up, going into all other different directions. So I ended up doing a lot of work in the domestic violence community and with battered women. And I'll tell you, it was always amazing to me. The women from the shelters, like, you get your arm broken by somebody, or you get a black eye, or, you have your head thrown against a wall, you've been abused. The wealthy women did not know that they were abused.
Mm.
They wouldn't even consider it most of the time. They were completely blind to it.
It's amazing that abuse doesn't have to be physical. It could be mental. It could be psychological. It could be financial. And the
Yeah,
hotline takes care of all different
all of
kinds
it.
of domestic abuse.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is really scary about right now with everybody shut in is there is a real increase in domestic violence, both for kids and for adults, because people are locked in their homes with their perpetrators.
Yeah.
And and with children, they don't have the opportunity of being in schools where teachers and counselors are seeing them and kind of, getting clued in to what's going on. So we're having a real epidemic right now, and it's very sad.
It's transcended larger numbers, and some of it's not being reported correctly because we're in a new normal. Kids are not going to school, so they're not getting that sort of diagnosis,
Hmm.
whether it's in a public school or whatnot. So the numbers are skewed in not the right way. It
Hmm.
is happening, and there are studies that are going out that's saying it's going at an alarming rate. So again, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 1-800-662-4357, and also the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Now you think about it. If you're getting beaten up by somebody and you're locked at home with them, you're stuck at home with them, how are you going to feel about calling the hotline or going on
Right.
your computer? I mean, they actually have it organized in such a way that if you go on your computer, they have a safe button that you can push very quickly so that you can hide it. But we used to go around and we would like put the numbers in women's bathrooms all over the city, so that people could stick something in their pocket and
Yeah.
have it. But man, it's
So
epic.
those are the numbers for sure. They have a chat bot when you go to the hotline.org. I could have sworn there was a text code as well, but I couldn't find it. If I find it, I'll put it in the comments
Oh,
afterwards.
yeah. I didn't I didn't think of that. Yeah.
A couple more comments I wanted to quickly show here, and I'll cover those numbers again before we wrap up. Merck says, "What would life look like today had you not gotten the correct medication?"
Well, Merk, it would probably look like you wouldn't be looking at me. I probably wouldn't be here. And I'll tell you something, when I had the wrong medication, when I was institutionalized and I was being given the wrong medication, I actually later on researched and wrote about the medically induced um, illness that I had. I mean, I had an iatrogenic illness because of the bad diagnoses and medication I was given. So getting the right stuff, Merck, it it feels like a miracle almost. Just to feel normal.
Sherry basically went Merck from my own experience. If Sarah did not receive correct med she meant, she unfortunately would be dead. So she definitely concurs
Yeah.
with what you just said.
Yeah.
Sue says, "Thank you, Sarah, for sharing. I too understand being private and glad you shared. So am I, and a lot of people in this room."
Thanks for saying that, Sue.
Oh,
It's always a risk.
the it is a major risk. By the way, Aubrey, that's Aubrey. He just it didn't pop up. Yeah.
Okay.
Des says, "Do you get frustrated with the way general public minimize mental health problems?"
Oh, it does. Um, Absolutely. I mean, you would think we would be at a place by now where they wouldn't distinguish between mental illness and physical illness because we now know it's all biological and biochemical. They're not different. And and the fact that we still have all this stigma about it. I mean, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I don't walk around, saying I have a mental illness because there is a stigma about it. And there's certain people, and I feel completely comfortable doing that here. But there are still people who really judge you and don't get it. They don't understand. They have all their own baggage around what mental illness is, and they really don't. They don't get it. But we absolutely. I mean, I hope that in this next administration we get our act together a little more with that because we have such an epidemic of mental illness in this country. And you look at it, it's like addiction, domestic violence, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I'll, like I said before, I'll share those numbers before we wrap up. There are a few more comments. Mark says, if it will pop up. There we go. I can relate to that, Sarah. I'm very glad you are here and sharing with us.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
And Aubrey says, I'm having an interesting week.
We don't know what that means.
We don't know. No idea, Aubrey. But I'm sure whatever it is, I'm sure it's interesting. That's starting like VF Talks again. I wanted to thank you for doing the show tonight and having a conversation with us. You have such an incredible story. Oh, now Aubrey has a comment. Here we go. It took a minute. I don't judge people on having to take their medication on their mental issues. I have a problem with people who believes that medication is the only answer to all their problems.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with you. Because it's not. It's not. But if it's the case that you have gone through a lot of different things and you come to understand that there's a biochemical imbalance in your system, if I had diabetes and I needed insulin, I would take insulin, right?
Right.
Same thing. Same thing.
Aubrey also reminds us that he's controversial and he likes making people squirm.
Do it, man. I I I resemble that remark.
Sherry says, toilets are a great idea because people often perpetrate, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Women's bathrooms. It was, we'd really hide this stuff around.
Yeah.
Airports. You knew.
Yeah, airports, absolutely. Absolutely. bring those numbers back up again.
Yeah, I want to thank you for putting that information forth, John.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm very glad, and I'm also one. I'm very thankful for our friendship. First and foremost, you're an incredible person, and you're just really great to talk to. You have such a great idea, great educated idea on a lot of different things. We talked about a lot of things, well off camera, whatnot. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you incredibly. You're awesome. I'm also really appreciative of the fact that you came on tonight to tell your story, because in this day and age, given how much we are dealing with mental health issues and addiction issues, and also domestic violence, this conversation needed to happen, especially around the holidays. And I'm glad you're able to tell your story, for sure.
Well, thanks, and I feel the same about you. You know,
Thank you.
it's a mutual admiration society.
Ob had a few more comments. He said, I took the hard way. I dealt with my crap, and I did not want to take medication to mask my problems. I was on antidepressants years ago, and I fired my doctor and got into the steps.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do, and medication isn't necessarily going to help you if you're an addict, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it just papers it over, and if you don't get at the underlying stuff. Same thing though with addiction. If you don't get what's underneath the addiction, you can just relapse and relapse and relapse. It's not, I mean, I've seen that unfortunately with too many friends.
Yeah. Ob also says people hate him for that. It's not a popular opinion, but if you understand your body better and you know what to do, then you got to do what's best for you.
Yeah, people judge you. Like, what does that say about them, right?
Right.
Other than it's not their business anyway. It's hard though. I mean, it's hard to live in this culture and not worry sometimes about being judged. I mean, I fall into that trap sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard.
We all have the tendency to think that way, especially I know I for one, absolutely, but a lot of the people that I've gravitated to in the last couple of years in this really crazy journey I've been on, crazy in the best way, mind you, but also have the same sort of mindset, and it's just part of human nature to go down that road for sure.
Well, I'm glad you climbed out of it, Aubrey.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you did, and then you also have turned into something really just incredible. Just your artwork is beautiful. I'm gonna bring your website back up.
Thanks. I should say
yeah.
My website is really half baked at this point. It's new and I'm learning, and so it's doesn't have a lot on it yet.
Yeah, Sarah. The thing is, what you have up there is I showed a couple of people. They love your site. And I'm sure there's more stuff that you're going to do to it, but we're really glad that you have the site and everything. But also the fact that you're live streaming and you have a little studio that you're building out and everything. You're incredible, absolutely incredible.
Thank you. I'm not even going to try to disagree because I could. So.
Also, Aubrey says would love to chat with you.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Marilyn says,
Aubrey one of the Aussies?
Yes, Aussie, Australia by way of Canada, and then back to Australia again. So he's been all over the place.
Okay.
I think somewhere along the way, the Union Jack has been involved both ways, but Australia, Canada, yeah. Marilyn says, well, Sarah, then we have a lot to look forward on your side to come, and then also thanks for sharing. More to come.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thanks.
And Aubrey is a Canadian living in Australia.
Okay.
There you
I'm
have
a
it.
Philadelphian living in Philadelphia. Actually, I'm
Right.
a New Mexican living in Philadelphia, and I have a New Mexico passport to prove it.
And hey, Jeanette, how are you? Glad you're able to catch us towards the end here. I'm going to pop the numbers one more time and then any final thoughts and whatnot. So, again, we talk about the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-4357. Again, 1-800-662-4357. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. You can reach them at thehotline.org. Any final thoughts, Sarah? Thank you again for doing this show.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what to say. You know, it goes on, and you never know what's next. This year is so bizarre, and at the same time, you know, I've met some people through Lita and through other things that I never would have met otherwise. And so, as I'm sort of taking stock of the year at the year's end, and going, oh man, there's also a lot of good that came out of it. So I will choose to focus on that.
Well, I will then tell you to have the most happiest and healthiest of holidays. And a very happy, we will talk during the holidays, of course, but a happy and healthy holiday and the happiest of New Year's. And much thanks once again for being on the program tonight.
You're welcome. Happy holidays to everybody. I hope they are. I hope you get some joy in the next couple
Thank
weeks.
you, Sarah. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, Sara Steele, ladies and gentlemen, an absolute incredible person to know and a dear friend, and I'm really glad that she did the show tonight. Again, the numbers for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the National Domestic Violence Hotline are up on the screen right now, and then her website is, I'll take that down real quick, is at sarahsteele.com. And needless to say, if you have any questions or comments, you know, always you can come back to these chats afterwards and definitely put the questions and comments up there. Bit of administrative stuff real quick. There will not be a VF Talks tomorrow night. Got some stuff to do this weekend. There will be a Venture Forward on Tuesday, which will be more of a holiday version. So things that are fresh in my mind given the last 2 months, but also this year and the last 2 years. We'll talk about all that outside of what we discussed on the thankful episode around Thanksgiving. And then there will be a VF Talks the next night on the 23rd. It will probably be in the 6:30 time slot. I'll give you guys some information on when that is and whatnot, but there will be a VF Talks next week on Wednesday and not on Christmas Day. And then a bit of a preview for next year or after the holidays. The first topic that we're going to be doing in 2021 will be depression. And we're going to spend at least 3 episodes on depression and talking about the different nuances of not only depression but anxiety as well. What depression and anxiety has meant to my life and my journey, and realizing that is definitely a thing. And then we're also going to get some professional opinions on the sort of depression and anxiety they have seen, but also ways that you can diagnose it and also take care of it by one way or another. So it should be a very good set of episodes, and that will start in the first week in January, the Tuesday, Thursday episode, and then the Tuesday after, and there will be information on that momentarily. A couple more comments. Aubrey says, thanks. You're a beautiful human being. Thanks for being on. I like you. We like you too. You're incredible. And Sarah, we love you. You're phenomenal. Merck says, good night, friends. Good night, Merck. Hope you're doing well. Sean says, caught the end, but it was nice to hear from Sara. She has a lot of wisdom. She has an incredible amount of wisdom, and it was great to have her on the show for sure. And you too, Sean, have a great night. And Aubrey, you have a great night too. You have a good day. It's a good day. You're in Australia. Got it. And on that, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every single Venture Forward or VF Talks. Stay safe. Stay sane. Stay strong. Stay sober. You're worth it. I'll see you on Tuesday night for a holiday show, so to speak. See you next week.